That's where I think they actually started. That is the stick of Joseph. I think that there's two things to look at here. Number one is you are talking about a book, but you're talking about a people also. And Manasseh is part of Ephraim, right? They're not separate from Ephraim. They are part of Ephraim because the northern tribes, this is a very common thing because it goes back to the idea of covenant. You've got to have a separation between God and man, and then man, God condescends below us. We try to move ourselves up to him. But he does this also with peoples. There's always a people that is split. There are two Jerusalems, right? There's the old Jerusalem, there's the new Jerusalem. There's Judah and there's Ephraim. These are two different lands, two different peoples that have been split. Egypt's the same way. You have Upper and Lower Egypt that have to work together, and then they get combined. With Judah and Ephraim, Manasseh is one of the major tribes of the northern kingdom of Israel. And that northern kingdom is, in a way, representative of the Book of Mormon. The second thing is, based on secondhand accounts, we're not talking about Lehi's family alone in the Book of Mormon, right? And I'm not talking about the Mulekites. I'm talking about the Lehites. Secondhand accounts will state from newspapers and interviews in the time of just after Joseph Smith and a little later that Ishmael was an Ephraimite.
Okay.
And if that's the case, then that
gets bold.
There's a lot of Ephraim there.
Yeah.
In fact, it states that Laban was an Ephraimite. And that's why he had the records, right? They were the stick of Joseph was passed. I call the brass place the stick of Joseph also. So it was in the hands of Ephraim. Because they were the ones in charge of the record keeping.
So is the brass plates part of the stick?
Well, it is the stick of Joseph.
It is the stick of
I
Joseph
see it that way
well,
because it's the legacy. Because what are they drawing from? When they're writing the Book of Mormon, what are they drawing from?
It's from the brass plates.
It's from the brass plates, to me, and this is gospel by Greg, I believe that the brass plates were handed down to Laban through a line of Ephraim that went through Joshua, and then went up all the way back to Joseph of Egypt.
Yeah. Oh, from Joseph
of Egypt.
Okay.
And so that's where I think they actually started. And so that is the stick of Joseph.
Yeah.
He started the stick. That's right. Again, opinion, but I think that that's what happened. It comes down, and in fact, the sword of Laban in a secondhand account historically in the 19th century was also Joseph's. Now, maybe it was a replica or, made later and could have lasted that long. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. But this legacy of Joseph comes down so strongly, right, to Lehi, who now Manasseh at this point takes over from the brother Ephraim in being the record keeper, and then eventually passing it back to Ephraim in the time of Joseph Smith.
Yeah.
Right.
So, Dave, I want to ask you.
Hold on.
The word. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. So Etz is not a stick.
Yeah, that's what I was about to ask you.
Etz is anything made of wood, but primarily it's a tree, actually. So I'm looking at this now. This is a passage I've not thought a lot about for a long time, probably. I think the tree of Joseph in the hand of Ephraim and the tribes of Israel, his companions, put them together, put them unto him together with the tree of Judah and make them one tree, and they shall be one in my hand. Now, first of all, a tree in my hand is very reminiscent of Proverbs 3, where wisdom is a tree of life. She is a tree of life, but them that lay hold upon her, and happy is everyone that holdeth her fast. But also, there's a lengthy passage in the Book of Mormon that is very reminiscent of this joining a tree to tree, and that ultimately ends up with the tree of life, which is to say the mother tree repeated 4 times, and the tree that has fruit desirable above all other fruit, right? And that is Jacob 5, right? So, this is like a really big conversation. But maybe this is a contiguous understanding to the way Jacob is quoting Zenos. That is to say that the gathering of Israel has something to do with the restoration of the tree of life, and that's a difficult thing for people, and that the gathering of Israel will only be, in other words, to receive, to hold on to keep without corrupting the understanding of the tree of life, and that the gathering of Israel is only ultimately accomplished when that tree can be reunified, which is definitely the image of Jacob 5, right? All the grafting stuff is literally tree to tree over and over again.
And seems to be primarily the original tame branches are Judah. It would seems to be represented that, or what's left of Israel that we know of at that time, and the wild branches being brought in seem to be more along the lines of the Ephraimite Gentiles, right? So you would have the two sticks there represented.
Yeah, so that's what to me, I'm reading this, and right now it's highly reminiscent of Jacob chapter 5.
Yeah.
Much shorter.
And why was, much shorter. Why is the stick, or why did they pick the word stick there? And it's probably just because it had to fit in his hand. You know what I mean? Like whoever the translators are, because there's no indicator there why it should be a stick, right?
Right.
Nibley makes a reference
Yeah.
to this. I'm trying to remember where he's pulling this from, but he talks about a covenant, and that anciently one of the ways they would make these covenants is, and I'm going to try and get this right, is that, as an example, the king would make a deal with, let's say, a landowner or somebody who wants to use his land for agricultural purposes, to produce something, right? And the king says, okay, well, here are my terms. I'm going to give you the terms here of what I will do and what I want from you. Maybe it's 10% or something, or 20, whatever, of the produce that is brought through out of this land, I want you to give to me or to the treasury of the temple. And everything else you get to keep and sell or do whatever you want to do with. And so what they would do is they would write this little treaty on a piece of wood, or a stick even. And they would then put on one side what the king is willing to do on his agreement, and then what the other person, the citizen, was willing to do on their side, right? And then they would go down the middle of this, and they would do almost a jigsaw type of a cut.
And they'd cut to get
through,
fit together.
Right? So then they would pull them apart. The king would hold the citizen's part, and they would keep that in the treasury of the temple. And the citizen would hold the king's part of what they have. And then when they came back and they needed to look through an agreement, or they did this annually, or whatever the agreement was, they'd come back and they had to fit back together, and they would show that that's what the treaty was. And so it's like a covenant that's being made.
Yeah.
And you've got the two sticks that are brought together, right?
Two pieces of wood, yeah.
Two pieces of wood that are separated and then brought back together, and that was the covenant or agreement of the king and the citizen.